If you grew up any time in the last 50 years, you learned one rule about food before you learned almost anything else. Fat is the enemy. Fat clogs your arteries, fat causes heart attacks, so we swapped butter for margarine. We bought skim milk, low-fat yogurt, fat-free cookies. Entire supermarket aisles were rebuilt around that single idea. And it made sense. It was science. Here's the thing. That's not quite what happened. Part of the science that taught America to fear fat was paid for, quietly, by the sugar industry, and the receipts still exist. The story we were taught goes like this. After the Second World War, America had a problem. Heart disease was killing more people than anything else. In 1955, President Eisenhower himself had a heart attack in office, and suddenly, the whole country was paying attention. Scientists went looking for a cause. The most influential among them was Ansel Keys, a physiologist at the University of Minnesota. Keys believed the culprit was dietary fat. His 7 countries study, launched in 1958, showed that nations eating more saturated fat had more heart disease. The idea caught on. By 1961, the American Heart Association was advising Americans to cut saturated fat. In 1977, the United States government made it official policy with the dietary goals for the United States. In 1980, the first federal dietary guidelines told every American household, eat less fat. The food industry responded, low-fat spreads, fat-free desserts, light everything. For 2 generations, this was simply what healthy eating meant. In this version of the story, science confronted an epidemic, found the cause, and acted. A reasonable story, told in good faith by serious people facing a real crisis. But there was another ingredient in the American diet, and in this entire conversation, it stayed remarkably quiet. Sugar. In 2016, a researcher at the University of California, San Francisco, named Kristen Kearns, published something unusual in JAMA Internal Medicine. Kearns had started her career as a dentist. She ended up spending years in university archives, and what she found there, together with Laura Schmidt and Stanton Glantz, rewrote a chapter of nutrition history. Internal documents. Letters between the Sugar Research Foundation, the research arm of the American sugar industry, and a small group of scientists at Harvard. Here's what those letters show. In July of 1965, newspaper reports linked sucrose table sugar to heart disease. Within days, the Sugar Research Foundation's Vice President of Research, John Hickson, approved a response. He called it Project 226. The project was a literature review, an article that would survey all the existing research on diet and heart disease. The foundation paid 3 Harvard nutritionists to write it: Mark Hegsted, Robert McGandy, and Frederick Stair, the chairman of Harvard's nutrition department. The payment was $6,500, about $50,000 in today's money. And this wasn't a blind grant. The objective was understood from the start. Hegsted wrote back to the foundation, "We are well aware of your particular interest in carbohydrate, and will cover this as well as we can." Drafts went to Hickson for review. When the final version was ready, he replied, "Let me assure you, this is quite what we had in mind, and we look forward to its appearance in print." In 1967, the review was published in 2 parts in the New England Journal of Medicine, the most respected medical journal in the world. Its conclusion: the dietary cause of heart disease was fat and cholesterol. The evidence against sugar was dismissed, point by point. The funding from the Sugar Research Foundation was not mentioned. Not one word. To understand why this mattered, ask the question this channel always asks. Who benefited? The sugar industry had seen this moment coming. Back in 1954, the foundation's own president, Henry Haas, gave a speech describing the opportunity. If Americans could be convinced to cut fat from their diet, the calories had to come from somewhere, and sugar's share of the American diet could grow by 1/3. A literature review may sound harmless. It isn't. Reviews are how busy doctors and policymakers decide what the evidence says. And this one carried Harvard's name. In the New England Journal of Medicine, at the exact moment, the fat versus sugar debate was being decided. There was no rule against any of this. The journal didn't require authors to disclose funding until 1984. By the standards of 1967, the scientists broke no law and no policy. That detail matters, and it's exactly why it worked. Then the story gets darker. In 1968, the same foundation funded an experiment of its own, Project 259, a rat study at the University of Birmingham. The early results pointed in an uncomfortable direction. Rats fed sucrose showed elevated triglycerides and signs of an enzyme pattern associated with bladder cancer. The foundation terminated the study. The results were never published. The world only learned about it in 2017, when Kearns and her colleagues found the records. So the same organization that paid for a review clearing sugar also shut down its own research suggesting sugar might be harmful. And the influence didn't stop at one article. Mark Hegsted went on to lead nutrition at the United States Department of Agriculture. In 1977, he helped draft the Dietary Goals for the United States, the document that turned Eat Less Fat into federal policy. To be clear about what the evidence does and doesn't show, historians don't claim one paid review single-handedly created the low-fat era. Ansel Keys built his case independently, and many scientists genuinely believed fat was the main threat. But the evidence suggests the sugar industry's money helped steer the debate at its most decisive moment and kept the spotlight off sugar for decades. Meanwhile, the food industry faced a practical problem. Take the fat out of food, and it tastes terrible. The fix was simple. Add sugar. The low-fat era wasn't just compatible with the sugar business. It was the sugar business. Walk into any American supermarket today, and the architecture of that 1965 decision is still on the shelves. Low-fat yogurt with 20 grams of added sugar. Fat-free dressings sweetened to compensate. Healthy breakfast cereals that are 1/3 sugar by weight. In 1980, about 15% of American adults were obese. Today, it's over 40%. Type 2 diabetes followed the same curve. That rise happened during the low-fat decades. Researchers still debate how much of it traces to sugar specifically, but the timing is not kind to the official story. And the federal government? It took until 2015, 50 years, after Project 226 for the dietary guidelines, to set their first explicit limit on added sugar, no more than 10% of daily calories. The mechanism hasn't retired, either. In 2015, the New York Times revealed that Coca-Cola had funded a research group called the Global Energy Balance Network, which argued that exercise mattered more than diet. The group dissolved within months of being exposed. The pattern is the same. Fund the science, shape the question, let the conclusion sell the product. The scientists of 1967 weren't cartoon villains. Most of them believed what they wrote. That's what makes this story worth knowing. It shows how a small amount of money, placed precisely, can bend what an entire civilization believes about something as basic as food. Science corrected itself. Eventually, it took 50 years. So the next time a label tells you what's good for you, it's worth asking one quiet question. Who wrote that sentence? This is Unwritten, and there's always more to the story.